street gangs. So he showed the interactions in various ways, and Shibata used those sociometric diagrams to show where the words had come from, which kids were using the words, where the words had come from, and she tied all the children together with networks. And what he discovered was that a few children had been much more active than the others. They were what he called language leaders. And then he took another step forward and he said, they all seem to have similar traits. They share certain personality traits. And these come from the article by Joe Negassi that's in the American Speech volume that I pointed out earlier. So, the language leaders are cheerful, popular, active in social life in the class, scholastically superior, more emotional and reasonable, likely to have elder siblings. Hey, wait a minute. That's just like Elizabeth. That's actually Anne Green Gables' son. I mean, Elizabeth has those characteristics as well. That's the description of the insider, so it seems to me. All right, so here, who are the insiders? The individuals who embody the social traits of their group prototypically. Socially, they have all the traits their friends have, only more. Linguistically, they actualize the linguistic trends of the group, but they do it prolifically. Though they're not innovators, they appear to be the prime carriers of language variation and change. And those traits appeared to hold in Japan, and they appear to hold in Canada, and there's no reason to doubt they hold everywhere in between as well. All right, so I've looked at a couple of Shibata's concepts that have influenced me at one moment or another and have made some kind of impact. Those things that are listed up there, of course, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's barely making any impression at all on the body of work that he left behind. And I myself have used more of his work than I've been able to tell you about today, but there's also tons, lots more left in there. And I hope that you'll take the time to discover Professor Shibata's work, to use it at least in an ancillary way, as the way that I've mainly used it from time to time. And I hope you'll take a look. I'm just going to end today with a kind of a personal mention, a kind of memoir of the sort of distant but occasional encounters that I had with Takeshi Shibata. This, again, another photo of it, and this I'll provide you with it. The man on the right of that is Willem Potars, who was Shibata's great collaborator in the dialect geography aspect of his work. They were very close they worked very closely together. And I first met Shibata, I first encountered him in 1984 in Victoria, British Columbia, when he came for the Methodist conference that year. And he stood up, right? It was the middle of summer, and he was always dressed in a suit and tie. And he was closely accompanied in those years by his wife, who was at his side every moment. And he was quite taciturn, quite self-contained, very formal seeming, especially compared to all the North Americans who largely dominated those meetings in those days. But not at all ill at ease, I wouldn't have said, but quite aloof seeming. And in 1984, my dialectology book had just been published at Cambridge University Press with Peter Trudgill, the dialectology, and at one of the coffee breaks I was surprised by Professor Shibata, who I didn't know at all. he came up to me with his wife close by, and he bowed and he congratulated me on my dialectology book, which amazed me. He obviously knew the book, and he also put me together with the book. And so it was very gratifying, particularly as I got to know who he was. So it was very, very gratifying. And then when I came to the Institute in 2006, he very graciously left a message with Yoshiyuki saying, or with Fumio, I think it was with Yoshiyuki, in the office anyway, saying that he was sorry to say that he couldn't come to my talk, which again I found very gratifying. And of course, he died soon after that. He was quite unwell at the time. So the meetings with him, he always seemed aloof. He did not seem like the kind of person who might have shared sake with me or a beer, and he never did. I never got to see him looking like this, but one of the photographs that Masao gave me has this visage, and it's encouraging for me to think that Takeshi Shibata occasionally could laugh out loud. A wonderful scholar. Thank you. If there are any questions, Yokyushi says it's all right for me to field them. Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, I was interested in. Oh, thank you. I was interested in this, the Shibata 1960, where the study of the kids that we just talked about, and I was wondering. You mentioned that he looked at some networks of the children. So I was just wondering. So there's personalities, cheerful, popular, and active. But I was wondering how much of it might be personality, how much of it might just be the pure networks or the density of interactions of those particular kids that are especially active. I wondered if the paper talks about that at all.
I don't recall. There's not a lot of sort of psychological conjecture, or he doesn't invoke social psychologists that I know of. He just does it on his own peg. And how he arrived at that list of traits, I think was, I mean, he doesn't at any time say these are the only children in this class with these characteristics or anything of the kind, which would be a considerable leap, right? And so it's all quite homely. I think that's not an unfair word to use, but interesting to me because he doesn't make a point that he doesn't find that the so-called language leaders are the ones who are going down the slide first and head first down at recess time, or are yelling the loudest at recess time, or any of those kind of. They are these sort of centrally located folks, and that's what impressed me about him. There's no study quite like that that I know of.
In one of the texts I read, children learn to say ha-ha as they mature. But looking at the graphs between up-down kids and down-down kids, does that prove that the down-down kids mature slowly compared to kids? I mean, does that happen a lot? Is there a social or even educational difference between up-down kids and down-down kids in Japan?
We're so lucky. Tim Vance is going to answer that question. Tim, can you say a few words?
Yeah, I can't really tell you a whole lot about this, but I did have a graduate student once who was born and raised in what's known as the downtown area. What's known as the downtown area of Tokyo. And we talked about this a great deal because it was a personal issue for her. And her point was that it was more a class thing than a geographical location thing. So her family was well educated. Her father had pretty high position at a company. And so despite the fact that her house was located in what's traditionally called the downtown area, she didn't really identify herself as a so-called downtown person. And that really sort of opened my eyes to the difference between, trying to construe class differences as geographical differences, as opposed to recognizing that, yes, even in Japan, there is social stratification. It's kind of a taboo subject almost among Japanese social scientists, but so that's not much help. But
well, that's nice. That's great to hear. And you're right. The uptown-downtown distinction, as I said in the slide, it seems to be covert class, but it's not something that Shibata was going to say is a class distinction. Exactly as Tim said it. And I think, the point of the graph is that it is decidedly upward bound, right? And all of those people in it will end up at 100% sometime. So, that's really the gist of it. And whether some of them take longer to get there than others, I don't know. I know there are lots of people in English-speaking areas who call their mother mummy long after other people do. So there is some variation. My microphone's not working? Okay, I feel like D-Mark. I've got it.
So can I quickly add something? Yeah, I was brought up in downtown Tokyo as well, and I also agree with, was it Tim? Or I didn't know his name, sorry, but I also agree that it's not geographical variations, it's rather social class. I was brought up in downtown Tokyo, and I'm also middle upper class, and yes, I agree with what was said, yes. It's a kind of common class.
Wonderful. That's great. Thanks very much.
Just a follow-up. What got me curious is that Shibata Sensei made a conscious effort to distinguish uptown and downtown in his research. And do all linguists do that, or it's just Shibata? Social linguists do that, or just Shibata Sensei who made a conscious distinction?
Well, we make distinctions between urban and rural, and
Uptown and downtown is what? Urban.
yeah, both urban. That's right. And I think, I don't think we have to make much of it. But Shibata was not going to say these are working class kids and these are middle class kids. He wasn't going to say that, right? And so you can construe it that way if you wish, but he's not going to help you.
Thank you.
Naomi.
I think the sample of Shibata's work that you just shared with us, fascinating. And it was, I think all of the examples that you gave us are based on either survey type data collection or experimental tasks of feeding these new vocabulary words. Is that representative of his work in general, or is that just an accident of the examples that you picked out, that none of them were based on examining naturally occurring conversational?
It is very much an accident. It's very much my selection. The largest part of his work, I think Fumio, this is right, the largest part of his work was in sort of dialect geography, but socially sensitive dialect geography, so very much sociolinguistic dialectology, well before its time. And so, for instance, his Soroka study, that is somebody talking about that at this